Sorry, I just realized that my microphone wasn't working there, so I'll get started. I'll just kind of go over this again. We're going to be doing audio today in Unreal Engine. So we're going to be importing some sound effects and going to be building a little audio mix for our car. Okay. This is going to be a lecture that it's going to be difficult to follow along with just because sourcing the files can be a bit time consuming, and I just have a huge library of audio files that I've downloaded over the years. And so I'm just going to show you some places where you can source sound effects. And this is the first place here is 99sounds.org. And they have a whole bunch of free sound effects here. Let me just share my screen again. So I'll also share audio, include sound. There we go. And so when you come to this website and you go to the free sounds here, you'll see that they have a whole bunch of sound effects packs here. This world sounds one, we can just click on any of these and you can preview them by listening to some of the sound effects on YouTube. So I can just click on this. Yeah, like this rusty bridge, right? So this is a really great source for sound effects. And they're also very large libraries. Like you can see, this is a 4 GB library of sound effects. And it's, yeah, just a lot of really good ones. And it's like an online recipe where like it tells you all about the person who made it and, you know, all of the different techniques they use to record it. So you kind of come down here to the bottom and you find the free download right here, and you can just click on that. And sometimes it'll take you to a page like this. Other times it'll take you to a Gumroad link. So I can just click download now, and it'll ask for your email. So you have to confirm your email. And then you just click continue and you can download. So it'll either take you to that page, and sometimes it will take you to, I think this one, I'll go to the electricity sounds here, go to the free download. It'll take you to this, there's another one called Gumroad. It's the same thing, where basically you just have to give it your email and it'll send you a download link. Yeah, this one. So if you might get taken to a page like this, where you just say, no, I want to give you $0, say, I want this. And it'll take you here, say, give us your email address, and then you can just say get. And again, it usually takes a couple of minutes to actually send you the what do you call it? Send you the link. So I'm not going to go through that whole process now. But I can show you what it looks like when you're done downloading it. So you can see I've downloaded a whole bunch of audio packs from these guys. And, you know, Nature Sounds was a really nice one. This is the World Sounds one that I showed. And you can see that they have just like a whole bunch of different audio packs in here. So I can go in here and be like, all right, you know, traffic. What do they have in here? They have this kind of like traffic ambience here. So if you're doing a city level, it might make sense to bring in some of those. You have waterfalls and trains, rivers and streams and all of that. And these are all really good, high quality audio. Okay. And so the way that you import an audio effect into Unreal is I'll just kind of minimize my file browser. So once you've downloaded some audio effects, oh, come on now. So, okay, here's our audio effects here. Right, and here's our content browser here. Just like we imported textures and stuff for our textures and 3D models, you just click and drag the asset into the content browser. So I'm just going to right click, create a new folder for audio. And if I want to import an audio effect, I'm just going to grab maybe one of these like jungle ones. I think these sounded pretty nice. That's like a nice ambient track. I'll kind of just click and drag that in. And you can see here's my audio, my sound. It's called a sound wave file. And here it is in Unreal Engine. I can click and play it to preview it and listen to it. Right. And the quick and dirty way of just getting audio in your level, so often when you're just kind of like prototyping and you want a quick background track in your level, So I can just grab this sound wave file, click and drag it into my level. So here it is. Now, if I press play, you can see that it's now playing in the background of my level. And you can see we have this like nature, jungle, forest, night ambience, midnight, cicadas, all this here in this ambient sound asset. Okay. There are other places that you can get really nice sound effects. We have this one here, sounddogs.com. Right here, sounddogs.com. This is used a lot for like movies and television shows and stuff. And so you can browse effects by category. Right now, I think their search thing is broken. They just recently redid their sound effects. So we can go in here and we can find some car noises. I can go to cars various. I can come and kind of look through, maybe find some engine noises. Okay, so here's some starts, ignitions. These are always nice. Listen to some car start sounds. All right, these are all pretty good. Those grinds actually don't sound too good, but right, so you can pick any of these and followed by short idle. Anyway, yeah, so you can Toyota starts and idles. So you can pick any one of these and pick just like, I'll just pick this, car rev peel away. Or this one here, I think was, yeah, this one was kind of nice. You click on the blue eye right here and you can download this MP3 preview like so. I'm gonna go to my assets file, go to my audio, and here I have Sound Dogs. And it'll just be like this preview 101, whatever. Just name it something reasonable. So I'll just call this car start. You can see now we have this car start MP3. I'll just go to where I downloaded it. Here it is. Now, if I just click and drag this MP3 file into here, I'll just click and drag it. You'll see it's not a Soundwave file. It's this file media source. And I can't really do anything with this, unfortunately. And that's because you have to convert audio files from MP3s into waves. And these are just different audio encoding formats. So if you have a whole bunch of MP3s that you think are really nice, they're not going to work out of the box. You have to do a little bit of extra work. My favorite way of converting MP3s to waves is using this software here called VLC Media Player. You can find this online, just search VLC Media Player. And this is a free open source video player. It's probably one of the best free open source softwares available right now. I've been using this for over a decade, and it just keeps getting better and better. And you can use this to convert audio from one type to another. So you just go to this menu here, Media. You come down here to Convert/Save. And you need to pick a file that you want to convert. So I'm just going to go click Add, and we had this car start, I believe, right here, car start. So there's our file. Then we come down to this button here, Convert/Save. And you can see our source file is our car start MP3. We are converting it. And when it comes to profile, in our case, you can click on this dropdown. You can see all of the different things that you can encode this into. Obviously, we're not doing any video encoding right now, so if you've ever done video editing, this will all be really familiar, like H.264 is an MP4. You can see there's a whole bunch of different audio encoding formats, but we can just scroll right down to the bottom and just select WAV, W-A-V. And we go browse to select we call it a destination folder, and I'm just going to call this file car start _wave just to distinguish it from the car start MP3. And I'll click start, and it'll convert it like so. I can exit VLC now. If I go here, now I have this car start wave file right here. I can click and drag, and now you can see it's my sound wave asset, and I can play it and listen to it. Right, there's my sound wave file in there. And there's one more really good source for audio. It is this website called zapsplat.com. Zapsplat.com. So let's go home. Here it is, Zapsplat. And they just have a whole bunch of really nice sound effects. These are not open source, so like you can do the same thing where you download MP3 previews, but you don't actually own the sound effect, so don't be using this in any commercial projects. But I can come down here and I can search for, you know, like car driving, you know, because I just want to get like a sound effect of a car moving. I think I can download the MP3 previews of the nice one. You need to create an account and log in. I think I have one. I could be wrong. Yeah, I don't remember my password. It's been a hot minute since I've signed into here. Anyway, not important. Create an account. You can sign in, and when you go in here, you can preview all of these. So you can like listen to this. That's pretty nice, you know. That's pretty good too. You could also search for car loop. Loop is just a way of saying that like the end of the audio blends seamlessly with the start of the audio. So like here's one like engine of a small buggy, damaged engine, idle loop. You know, you can come in here and try and find like a loop of audio. Police siren, yeah. So yeah, you can just kind of search for different sound effects on here, and you come to the download button and you select MP3. It's the kind of the same deal with SoundDogs. You can download the MP3 preview, but if you try and download like the high quality WAV file, they're going to try and charge you money, so just ignore them. The last place you can look is fab.com. Again, this is kind of Unreal Engine's built-in marketplace. You can look for product types using this list on the left-hand side here. You can search for audio, and for the price, I'm going to filter by free. And you kind of have to be careful with Fab just because there's a lot of kind of crap on here these days. There's a lot of AI slop. So like anything that you look at that has like a really obviously crappy AI generated image, I would always recommend avoiding that. But you know, they do have some audio effects on here. I haven't sourced a whole lot of audio effects on here. Okay, so that's how you import audio effects. I've already imported a whole bunch of audio effects and just kind of brought them in for another section. So you can see here, I just imported a whole bunch of kind of car and engine sounds. And these are all ones that I've sourced online using the process I just showed you of going on those websites, playing the sounds to preview them, downloading them, converting them, and importing them. Right, so here's like a car driving. Here's an ignition sound. Here's like another kind of background car tone. This is actually a plane, like a plane propeller sound. I just kind of liked it because I felt it added a little kind of like rumbly engine ambience to the background of the car mix. We've got this one here, which is like a small engine, and got some tire squeals as well. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to build something called a sound cue. A sound cue. So I'm going to go into here into my audio. I'm actually just going to copy all of these sound effects here into this other section. Go to audio and just copy them here. So now I have all of my like car sound effects here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to audio like this audio tab right here, and we have this asset right here called a sound cue. And I'll call this SC car mix underscore FS2. Now, if I click play, nothing happens by default. But if I double click on this, we get taken to one of our handy dandy graph editors. In my opinion, this is the easiest graph editor to use in Unreal Engine. And that's because when you right click, you only have like maybe 24 functions, whereas with materials and blueprints, you have like 1 million functions. You have way too many. So what you can do is let's say I want to add a sound to my sound cue. On the left-hand side, or on the right-hand side rather here, we have our kind of list of all of the different nodes that we can bring in, all of the different functions. I'm just going to grab this one at the bottom called a wave player. I'll click and drag. Now we have this node called a wave player. And you can see when you select it, we have kind of the settings for the node for the function here on the left-hand side, where we have a sound wave, which is our sound effects that we've imported. And then we have this toggle for looping, which is just if we set looping to true, when the sound effect is done playing, it'll go back to the beginning and it'll keep playing, right? So it plays on loop. So I'm going to click this drop down. I'm just going to look for a sound effect here. And I'm just going to grab my car driving wave here. And here it is. Now, if I select this node, I can come up to the top here where we have the save button, solo, mute. I have this button here to play node. I can click on that, and it will preview the sound effect of the node I have selected. If you want to stop listening, click stop. Okay. Now if I deselect the node, so I had it selected, you can see it's outlined in gold here, and I just click on the background grid here. I can also click play cue to kind of preview the whole mix. So if I click play cue, right now nothing is happening. And that's because I need to plug something in to the output here. Right? So I'm just going to take the output here of my wave player and plug it in like so. Now if I click play cue, you can see it previews kind of what is getting plugged into my output here. Okay, so that's all well and good for playing like a very simple audio effect, right? And like before, I can click and drag this sound cue into my level, and here it is. And it's like an ambient sound type. And if I click play, I can now hear my sound cue as well. This is not an ideal way to use sound cues. Again, that's just kind of the quick and dirty way if you want to click and drag it into your level for kind of general background noise, things like music. That's a very fast way to just get it up and running. Okay. The ideal way to use this is to kind of call it from blueprints. So I'm going to come to this template folder. This is a folder that you were provided in your template repository. And I'll come to the blueprints folder here, and I'm going to come to my cart right here. And you can see I've done this example for another class. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this, and we're going to go through the process of building it together. You wouldn't have had that information in there. You wouldn't have had anything like that, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so here we are. We're inside of our BP_cart. This is the car that you were provided. And you should have a begin play event here. We are going to ignore this for now. And then we have this event tick here. And you will have these bunch of functions plugged in here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a sequence node in between tick and this for each loop just to get us started. We'll come back to this sequence node in a second. The way you do that is you hold the S key and you click, and you just kind of plug it in between, like so. That's what we're going to do. And then we're going to come down a little bit, and we have these two nodes here. We have our IA underscore steer. That's so you can see this enhanced input action, IA underscore steer, and this enhanced input action, IA underscore accelerate. These are the events that trigger when we press the W and the S key, and the A and the D key, respectively. Excuse me. So what we're going to do is I want to play my sound effect when I start to accelerate, right? Because I want to play my car noise once my car starts moving. So I'm going to come to this started. So I can expand this input action here by clicking on the little arrow at the bottom. And I'm going to select the started pin here, right? So you have triggered, started, ongoing, canceled, completed. Started, if you hover over it, it'll tell you what it does. It gets triggered when the input action begins, which is basically when you press the key. So I'm going to click and drag, and I have my whole list of functions I can call. And I'm going to call a function called create sound 2D, like so. Create sound 2D. I'm just going to move this IA steer down a little bit, move it out of the way. And you can see it has an input here for the sound, and it returns an object for our, basically to use as a reference that we can promote to a variable. So for the sound asset here, I'm going to click, and you can see all of our like sound effects that we've imported here. Like I imported some birds for another section. Just to keep myself sane, I'm going to search SC underscore because I prefaced it with SC underscore to be able to search things easily. And here's my SC car mix FS2. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to promote this value, this return value, to a variable. I'm going to click, I'm going to drag, and I'm going to promote it to a variable, and I'm just going to call this audio mix, or maybe like driving audio mix, or driving sound cue. Yeah, that makes sense, driving sound cue, because this is the sound cue that's going to play when we're driving. All right, so we've created an object that basically contains our sound cue and set it as a variable. The reason we do this is just so we can kind of get a reference to it later when we want to manipulate it later on down the line. And then I'm going to click on this blue node here, click, drag, and release. And I'm just going to search for the play function. Play. And it'll do this. I don't know why it did that. I'm going to try this one more time. Just going to go to play. Yeah, okay, here we go. If I click and drag and release, press play, here we have our play function right here. So when we start to accelerate, we're going to create our sound effect and we're going to play our sound effect. Right. Okay. So now if I press play and I press my W key, now it is playing our driving sound effect. But we have a problem. When I release the W key and I stop moving, we still have this driving sound effect here. So we need to pass some parameters. We need to pass data from our cart blueprint to our sound effect. We need to figure out how to do that. So I'm going to come back to my audio and open up my sound cue again, my SC underscore car mix. I'll do that here. So we have this car driving wave right here. I'm just going to grab this node here on the right-hand side, crossfade by param. Param is short for parameter, so we're going to crossfade this by a parameter. I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the output of this wave here, plug it into my crossfade by param, and then plug my crossfade by param into my output there. Now, if I select this, you can see we have this menu here on the left-hand side. And we have the first thing we have here is this param name. So what I'd like is for this effect to kind of fade in as I start going faster. So I'm just going to create a parameter called speed. Okay. And what this speed is going to be, the way I'm going to set this up, is that speed is going to be a value between 0 and 1, where 0 will mean that my car is stopped and I am not moving, and a value of 1 means I am moving at my top speed. I am going as fast as I possibly can. Now, if I click save, you'll see now we have these 4 options here for our index 0. Each of these indices represents one of our inputs, right? So index 0 is our first input there. We have this fade in speed start and fade in speed end. And if you hover over it, it'll tell you what it does. It says the param value at which to start hearing this sound. Okay. So I want to say, okay, I want to start hearing this sound when I'm going, if I say 0.1, so 10% of my max speed. And I want this to be fully faded in, like I want to hear this 100% at a value of 1 when I'm going 100% of my max speed. Then we have this one here, the fade out speed start. So this is the param value at which it starts to fade out. And then the param value at which it is no longer audible. So for the fade out, I'm just going to set this at a value of I guess 0.095 to just make it a little less than 0.1 and have it fade out completely at a value of 0. Okay. And just to keep this nice and clean, with my crossfade by param node, I'm going to right click on this second input here and just delete that input, just so we only have the one input here. Okay. I'm going to go back to my cart. So we need some way for our cart to tell our sound cue how fast we're going, right? And to do that, I'm going to come back up to my event tick here, right? Where we put this sequence node in. So here I have this second then node. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my driving sound cue variable here, the one that we just created. We're going to say get it. I'm going to click and drag and release and say set float parameter. And you have two options. Either of these set float parameter functions will work. I'm just going to select the first one. And I'll plug this then into this set float parameter here. And you can see that there are two additional inputs. We have the in name. Now this is the name of our parameter. So we named our parameter speed. This needs to be named exactly. It's case sensitive, symbol sensitive, space sensitive. You need to be exact with this. And then we have this in float. So we want to pass a value between 0 and 1 based on how fast we are going. Now, we've already made a function like this for our class with our speedometer, UI that we made. And I've just created a function for it here. And I've called this function getPlayerSpeed KMH. You can create this by clicking the plus function button, naming it getPlayerSpeed. And if I double click on this, you'll see this is what it contains. I'll make this a little wider so you can see. And what this function does is it returns the player speed in kilometers per hour. So if you want to recreate this function, these are the nodes. You can kind of pause the video and go through and right click. So this function is called getVelocity, right? And then you multiply it by 110. You get the vector length. You multiply it by 0.00, how many zeros is that? 0.00001. Multiply it by 60, multiply it by 60, and this is now kilometers per hour. And I know, just from having tested, that we're going about 80 kilometers per hour. Oh, also, if you select either your return node or your purple node here, we have this pure toggle here that I've set to true. So just do that, yeah. And you'll see why in a second. Setting a function to be pure, if I click and drag my get player speed kilometer per hour, so I've gone back to my event graph here. This is that set float parameter function we've created. A pure function will make it just this little green node that just returns a float, as opposed to this kind of execution pin where it might get in the way. Okay, I know that we're going about 80 kilometers per hour. So I'm gonna, if I want this to be kind of a ratio of our max speed, I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna divide it. So divide. And for the second input here, I'm just gonna put 80. Now I know we can also go a little bit faster than 80 kilometers an hour. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag and clamp float, clamp brackets float right here. And what clamping a value does is it takes an input here, the value, and then we have two more inputs for our minimum and our maximum. And if the value that we plug in here is less than the minimum that we define here, it'll bring it up to the minimum. And if it is greater than the maximum, it'll bring it down to the maximum. If it's, so if I get a value of like 1.5 from these two nodes here, and that's greater than a value of 1, the return value here will be 1. If this, for whatever reason, returns a value of like -10, I don't see how it could ever do that. It will instead return a value of 0 here. I'll just plug that in there. Okay, I'll hit compile and save. I'll click play. Now I start moving. And, I must be missing something. Getting a little error here. Let's see what's going. Access none, trying to read property driving sound cue. We need to be a little more diligent. So what we need to do here, so we were getting an error where it was basically saying accessed none, trying to read property driving sound cue. So right here on tick, it's saying, hey, you're trying to set this float parameter on this object, but this object doesn't exist yet, right? Access none, there's nothing here. So we can't call this function. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna right click and just say is valid. Actually, I'll do the easier way. So here we have our driving sound cue with this little blue object output here. I'll click and drag and say is valid. And I'll just say only set the float parameter here if this object is valid, right? So if this is a null value, if there's nothing stored in this variable, it's not valid, we're not going to do anything. But if we have created it, then set the float parameter. Now let's see if it works. Oh, it doesn't seem to be playing our audio anymore. Wonder what we are missing. Fade out speed. I'm going to set the fade out speed and start and end here in my sound cue to 0. So have my crossfade by param selected. I'll set those two to 0 and see what happens for fading this in. What am I missing? I did this example in class the other day. What am I missing? Create sound cue, volume multiplier, start time, driving cue, play. And then on tick, get the player speed in kilometers per hour. That's right. That's our parameter for speed. Okay. I'm going to try grabbing this wave player and set it to looping right here. All right, so I just want this to play on loop, and then I come here, fade in, speed start, speed, graph. If this is valid, set the speed here, and then, yeah. Accelerate, started, create sound, auto destroy, driving sound cue, play. Right. Okay. There we go. You can see as I come to a stop, it fades out. As I start driving up to max speed, it starts to fade in. Now it's at its maximum volume. Right? Okay. I'm going to come back to my sound cue here. Maybe I want to layer a couple of different audio effects here to create like kind of a more interesting driving ambience. So I could click and drag here and add in more wave players this way just by like clicking and dragging the wave player node like so. Oops. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize this window a little bit so I can see both my content browser and my node graph here. And I'm just going to click and drag a couple of these other interior driving loops here. So I've got this long driving loop, and I'll drag in this prop plane here. So now I have 3 audio effects that I want to layer to create my driving ambience. On the right-hand side here, we have a node called a mixer. And what this does is it mixes audio. It kind of jumbles them all together. So I'm going to click and drag this mixer right here. Here's our mixer node. I'm just going to click and drag to connect. Now I want to add a third input, so I can click this plus on the add input here and click and drag them all together like so. I'm just going to select these other 2, the car driving loop and the medium prop plane loop. I'll select them both, and I'll also toggle looping to be true, because I just want them to keep playing as long as the car is moving. Now if I click play cue, there we go. Oh no, okay, I guess this doesn't work because my crossfade by param, the speed by default is 0. I'm going to select my mixer node here and click play node. And you can see now it is mixing all 3 of these audio effects. With the mixer as well, you have these volume inputs here, right? So maybe I think the prop plane is a little loud, so I can bring that down. This car driving wave is a little much, so I'm going to bring that down to a little bit too. All right, there's my car ambience now. Okay. Now if I come back here and I press play, now you can see we have our kind of full ambience playing. Go approach my max speed, it gets louder, it gets slower. I might want to go in here and actually play with the fade out now, because I find it's not fading out quite as quickly as I'd like it to as I approach a stop. So I'm going to say my fade out speed start is going to be 0.1, and my fade out speed end is going to be 0. So we're going to start to fade out when our speed value is 0.1, and it'll no longer be audible when the speed value is 0. But I have a problem. So I just mashed the W key in quick succession a couple of times. And what happened is it started to get really loud, and this sound effect started to layer on top of itself several times. If I go back to my cart here, to my IA accelerate here, where I create the sound and hit play, basically what's happening is it's creating the sound multiple times and playing it multiple times, which is not what we want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another validity check. So just like we did up here, where if our sound driving cue is valid, I'm going to grab my sound driving cue here, click and drag, say get. And I'm going to click and drag off of here and say is valid. And I'm just going to plug the started into there now. And in our case, we only want to create a new sound effect and play it if we don't already have one. So I'm going to say if it's not valid, create the sound and play it. Because if it is valid, we've already created it, we're already playing it, we don't need another one. And I'll hit compile and save. And I'll press play. Now I can mash the W key as many times as I want. It doesn't matter because we still only have the one sound effect. Okay, I'm going to do a couple more things to make this more interesting. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another mixer node here, like so. I'm going to add the kind of driving ambience here to one of the inputs. And I'll kind of minimize it here, and I have this ignition sound effect. I'm going to click and drag it up here. I'm going to plug that into the front end of the mixer there. And with this wave player for the ignition, I'm going to set looping to false. So I don't want it to loop. Basically, I want the ignition to play once when we start playing the sound effect, right? Because we're starting our car. When we first start moving, we get our engine ignition sound. I come here and press play. Look at that. Beautiful. Okay. And now what I want to do is add some like tire screeching when I'm turning left to right. So I'm going to come to this like kind of final output mixer here, and I'm going to add another input. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab another crossfade by param. So I'm going to click crossfade by param, click and drag it in. I'll plug that into the third input. Now for this one, we don't necessarily want our parameter to be the speed. We want a parameter for how much we're turning left to right. Now we already have a parameter for that, luckily, and I'll show you where that is on our cart. But for the param name, I'm just going to call this turn, maybe like turn rate. Yeah, turn is good. And I've found these two tire squealing sound effects. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select both of them. So click this one, shift, click this one, click and drag them in. Oh, come on now. And what I'd like to do is while I'm turning, I wanted to just kind of pick a random one of these and play it. This is something you'll see a lot when doing like footsteps for characters. If you play the same footstep sound effect again and again and again, it gets really obvious. So you kind of want like a handful of sound effects and you pick a random one. So I'm going to grab this random node here. I'll click and drag and put it in here. You can see it has two inputs. I'll just take my two tire squeals and plug them in like so. And I don't want any one of these sound effects to loop, but I kind of want it to pick a random sound effect on loop, right? So we have this node here called looping. I can click and drag this in like so. And I'll just plug this into the first input of my crossfade by param. And I'll right click and delete this input. So to kind of go over what this is doing, on loop, so like indefinitely, we're going to select a random one of these two sound effects. And then we're going to blend this sound effect in based on how fast we're turning, based on how like harshly we're turning, if that makes sense. Okay. There we go. Let's go to our BP_cart. I'm going to come back up here to where we're doing our sound cue stuff. I'm going to just copy and paste my driving sound cue over here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to call this set float parameter value. Set float parameter right here. Now the parameter for our tire squeals was called turn. And we have an input that returns a value between -1 and 1, depending on how much and in which direction we're turning. So if I right click and I say get turn input, we have this turn input function here, or turn input variable. If I come down to this IA steer, you can see when we have the A or the D key held, this is action value is going to return a value between -1 and 1 and set our turn input to that value. So if we're holding down the A key to turn left, our turn input will be -1. And if we hold down the D key to turn right, our input will be +1. So I'm going to click and drag off of this, and I'm just going to search absolute. And we have this absolute float here. And all this does, absolute, all this means is if this value is negative, make it positive. So if this is returning -1, make it +1 instead. If it's returning -0.5, make it +0.5. Basically just removes the negative symbol on any integer or float that we have. And then what I want to do is I want to multiply this by the speed value here. And the reason why I'm doing this is imagine we're not moving at all, like we're at a complete stop, and then I press the D key. It doesn't really make sense for our tires to be squealing when we're not moving. So just by multiplying this by the speed, we're basically saying, okay, like, yeah, if we're not moving, if our speed is 0, our turn input is 0, don't fade in our tire squealing sound effect, like so. I'll plug that into the infloat here. I'm going to go back to my sound cue here, into this crossfade by param for my turn. And I'm just going to fade in turn start at 0 and fade in turn end at 1. And we're going to start to fade out. Yeah, 0 and 0 should work for those values as well. Let's see what happens when we click play. Right now that I come to a stop, and if I hold the A and the D key, it doesn't do anything. Okay. And you don't have to build a car sound cue. This I'm really just building this as an example, right? But let's say, looking at this, we can blend different sound effects together. We can fade different kind of sets of nodes in by passing a parameter. We can select random sound effects on a loop, and then we can mix them all together. So let's say you're doing, any sound effect that you want to do. You want to do like a jungle sound effect. Like one of you has like a desert, I believe, right? So you want to do a desert sound effect. So maybe you want some kind of like wind blowing, and then you want some kind of like sand, kind of like, I don't know. I'm not great with sound effects, but like some kind of sand roughness sound, if you will. Maybe you want to get some like, you occasionally you want to mix in a random bird chirp or wolf howl on loop, right? If you select your looping node, or no, the Ren looping. Okay, there's one thing that we can do here. We can grab a delay node and say, okay, on a random, actually, I'd probably plug it in like so. Right, so if I did this, right, I could say, select a random one of these two sound effects every, 1 to 5 seconds, do that on loop and mix it in, right? You could build like a jungle sound effect by maybe getting like a waterfall. You find some kind of some wind rustling through the leaves. You get some light rain. and then you mix that in with the occasional howler monkey, bird, and frog on loop. And, you know, when it all starts, you have like a drum beat play. I don't know, right? You have a lot of options. And as far as like, you might be thinking, okay, well, like what sound effects should I bring in? What would the reasonable sound effects be? The answer is I don't know, right? You would have to listen to kind of soundscapes from things that meet your needs. So if you have a desert sound effect, right? Like again, I think one of you has like pyramids and a desert in your level. You would go on YouTube and you would listen to some movies that are set in the desert, right? You would say like desert scenes movies. And then you would click play, you would close your eyes, and you would just listen to the sounds in the background that they use to create the environment. And you'd start to create a list, right? So let's say I go in here. It's a good example. This is a really iconic movie, right? So if I wanted to do a jungle scene, right, I can close my eyes. I hear birds kind of chirping. I hear some insects. I hear kind of rustling leaves. And in terms of the music, I can hear that occasional, like, almost like woodblock hit. That sounds like it could be fun to mix in. Okay, we got like a snarling animal there. That's nice. Oh, okay. Right. You can see that you kind of close your eyes, you listen, you make a list, and now that I have a list of sound effects, I can go on those websites and start to try and I can search for those sound effects and find ones that meet my needs, and then build that soundscape. Okay, that's one of your options for your final lab, and that's it for today. Yeah, fairly short lecture. You guys got an extra 20 minutes to yourselves. Okay. Any questions about sound effects?
No question today.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you all for showing up, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Hi, Brent, sir.
Hi, yeah, what's up?
Actually, I want to talk about something else, not just about this lecture.
Oh, yeah, is it about what you messaged me about?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll send you the response in writing. I just think that's the better way of going about it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, yeah, because I saw your message and I've just kind of been figuring out what to reply with. Okay,
Okay. Thank you.
no problem. All right, have a good one. Bye bye.
Thank you.